Hello and welcome to the Best Life of Wellbeing podcast. Today is Self-Care Tuesday. Before we move on, please don't forget, subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell to get notified when episodes are released, like our content, and comment. We want to hear from you. Everyone, it's Donna Marie, host of the Best Life of Wellbeing podcast, designed to encourage you to focus on your overall well-being by stepping out of your comfort zone and stepping into embracing your whole life by focusing on your end of life so that you live fully and die peacefully. We are well into 2024, and I'm chiming in to ask you, if you haven't already, really sat down and reflected and really considered the way you live 2023, I encourage you to take this next few days to do that now. We are in the new moon phase. The first new moon of 2024 was on January the 11th, and the first full moon will be on January 25th. And so while we're still in this new moon phase, I encourage you to just, if you haven't already, reflect over your year. In many cases, we are operating in autopilot and survival mode, and we really don't take a lot of time to think about what we're gaining, what we're leaving behind, what we're grieving, what we're feeling. We experience grief in so many areas of our life, and in many cases, we never gain the lesson that grief has for us. We learn through every single experience, the good experiences and the not so good experiences. And so please take this time out to give yourself the opportunity to really look at your calendar, look at some notes, just look at pictures in your phone, analyze. Look at what you've learned. Ask yourself some questions. What gave you joy? When were you the most free and the most happy and the most energized? What were your ahas and your epiphanies? Or did you notice a time when you were just stepping out of your comfort zone comfortably, using your voice in a way that you hadn't before? Is there a new skill you learned? Have you developed new wisdom? What were the highlights of your 2023? What would you do again? What would you like to do again? What would you never want to experience? And what's the toughest thing you experienced, and how did you show up in that really tough space or that tough time? Did you show up in a way that represents who you are at your core? Do you walk the talk of your values and your beliefs, especially during those tough times? So think about, how you lived your 2023, and think about the person you are and the person you know you are. Are you being that person? Are you walking according to who you believe you want to be in the world? So I'd like you to join me in a ritual that has helped me. Following the phases of the moon, or a lunar ritual, has really helped me to connect with community, to practice meditation, to utilize the cycles of the moon to help me tap into silence, tap into carving out time to consider how I'm living. As I am taking inventory of my own life and reflecting over 2023, I'm going back and reviewing some of my past interviews, and one that stood out is the one with Dr. Alana Curry. Dr. Alana Curry has a trauma cure session coming up February 2nd through the 4th, and I'd like to invite you to that session. So please listen to this clip.
What I learned in that role was that we're all traumatized, and that we have a dysfunctional definition of trauma. There are many, many things that are psychologically traumatizing, from climate disasters to racism, sexism, gender-based violence, gun violence, COVID. There are just so many things And I think years ago, I used to shout, trauma is everywhere. And people are like, no, that's not true. It's just, you just seeing it everywhere. Now people are like, oh, okay, I understand what she's saying. Trauma is not just those huge things. There are lots of things, small micro traumas that are constantly happening to us. And the good news is that it's it affects the same parts of our brain. So my role now, because I am no longer in clinical medicine, I teach and I train people to understand the primitive brain systems that are predictably programmed by trauma. And I give them tools to help them reorient their own mindset and thought process so that they can immediately be able to make different choices and have better control over the outcomes they create. I remember some years ago, this journey for me started around 2016, 2015. No, actually, before that, 2014. Michael Brown Jr. Was a young man that you may be familiar with that was killed by a police officer in Ferguson, Missouri. And I grew up in St. Louis. That was my stomping grounds. So I was very familiar with the mindset that Michael may have been in. But I also was married to a police officer at that time. So I had a lot of experience and exposure to law enforcement and the extraordinarily difficult job that they have to do. And so the entire situation put me in a space of forced empathy, where, empathy being taking the perspective of another outside of that of which your own brain and body can show you. And when I did that, I understood how divergent our perspectives, our experiences of each other can be, right? Even when we're sitting in the same space right in front of each other,
Yeah.
we're referencing different thoughts, we're interpreting things differently. Human communication is just full of misinterpretations. And that actually led me on the exploration of, pardon my language, but WTF, like what's wrong with humans?
Right.
Like if this is the best that we have and I'm doing the best and operating in the highest spheres of psychiatry and medicine and mental health, then obviously there's some information missing. Something must must be missing because what we're doing is not working. I could see even in 2014, 2015 that we were, as a society, as a human race, on a very divergent course of how we were thinking. And it made me start to want to understand, like, why are we like this?
As you were talking, when you mentioned empathy, and I said empathy for myself, and
Mm-hmm.
is that possible? Like, so what I was thinking is my younger self. It's like I didn't understand her, and now I understand her. I have empathy
Absolutely.
for her. She's me, and I am her, and she
She's
took
doing
care
the
of
best she
me.
knew how. Yep.
Yes.
Absolutely. And it really, empathy for self is really the core mechanism that leads to the healing, right? However, it's also important to have empathy for others because it gives you perspective that helps you have your own healthy mind, right?
Yes.
Because first of all, we're not taught enough about these concepts. Even the concept of empathy, many people will hear that word and a bunch of different definitions and concepts of what it means to be empathetic or an empath or what have you come to mind. And for many people, that's not something they want to be. They're like, empathy, like, how do I empathize with people who are actively oppressing me?
Right.
Or how do I empathize with myself when I feel guilty about what I did? And according to my belief systems, I should never be allowed to be happy ever again, right?
Right.
So there are so many different challenges. And quite frankly, the way that our world is set up, it grossly lacks empathy and a deeper understanding of why people make the decisions that they do. When it comes to learning to empathize, it's us trying to relearn something that's biologically in us, but that is trained out of us from birth.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, as we grow up and we learn the rules of society, they teach us to be disconnected. They teach us to interpret each other as being so different and so foreign and not having feelings or ignoring our emotions or not speaking about them, avoiding them, or even believing that we don't have them or that they're
Right.
bad or they come from your gut or they come from your heart. And there's so many, myth information. That's what I call it, myth information. Because when you are taught to believe that how you feel is because of something that other people are doing, I'm doing this because of what the other person is doing, or, the devil is tempting me, or God made me do it, or whatever, stories that you've learned to tell yourself about your behaviors, it removes your own accountability and it removes your power. So when people are taught that their emotions come from their brain, which is where it actually comes from, and that all your decisions are made with your brain, nowhere else. It's your brain takes into account sensations and input from other parts of your body for sure, but all of your choices, your words, your actions, your facial expressions, this whole thing is controlled by this brain. Point blank, period. And that means that short of some, outside hand or something, some puppeteer strings that you can't see, right? That means that we have to really start paying attention to our thoughts, our words, our beliefs, because that's what's creating the juice in here that we then justify our actions and outcomes.
Empathy and apathy. How do you get to empathy? How do you get to empathy if you don't really have that self concern and you're not really connected to what's happening? You're desensitized and you're just like, whatever. How do you get from there to caring about somebody else's experience?
Sure. Well, I would venture to say that apathy has gotten us where we are. Apathy meaning lack of caring, lack of connection, lack of awareness, just like, oh, okay, wars on the other side of the earth,
Right.
you know, okay, fine. And because we think in so much division, we assume that things that affect those people over there don't affect us, right? It's the assumption that the human race is somehow separated, or that we're all these individual little beings. And we are, right? But part of also healing our mindset is understanding that while we are individual, we are also in inextricably connected.
Yes.
Meaning that even though you don't know that person, they're a complete stranger to you. They may be on the other side of the earth, because we are all a little speck of dust in the universe, right?
Yeah. Right.
Floating around on this huge spaceship that's turning and circling the earth, and the sun is zooming in circles around the solar system and the Milky Way. So we are but dust. However, for our individual experiences, we're everything, right? We are so big internally in terms of what our body and our brain experiences in our everyday life. So it's being able to appreciate the reality that we are connected, so we need to care. Now, is it easy to care? No. And actually, it's when the people who have done my program, they're like, this is hard. Like, I'm not asking you to do anything easy, because if it was easy, we'd have done this millions of years ago, at least a few thousand, right? It takes knowing what's happening and having the awareness of it. And that's the first step.
Yes.
So humans are like toddlers when it comes to understanding our own body and brain, because of how poorly we've been educated about it. Like, I liken it to, we're advanced technology, like we are the most advanced technology on earth, but we know all this external technology like computers and phones and video games and media, television, and we're also captivated in that. However, this technology, this body technology, this brain and this spirit that's all bottled up in each one of us, is the most advanced technology on earth.
Yeah.
So how many years have we been studying humans and studying ourselves, and we're still, even with thousands and millions of intelligent brains and made billions over these years, trying to figure out what it is to be human. Here we are, still confused, still figuring it out, right? So we can forgive ourselves, especially when we've never been taught, like, oh, basic stuff like, hey, your brain creates your emotions based on what you are interpreting and telling yourself about the data that it's taking in through your eyes, ears, nose, mouth, skin, etc. And it's making calculations and kicking out interpretations that are distorted based on how your brain is designed. And you have to sort through that because what you think about something may not actually be the truth. Wouldn't it be great if we all knew that?
The Trauma Cure: Creators Using Radical Empathy.